The goal of Catholic education is to sculpt minds, hearts, and souls to be successful in life. For countless reasons, Catholic school education is very important to the Catholic Foundation and many of our donors who have created scholarship funds, who have created legacy funds that provide tuition assistance now and in the future. And today we're fortunate to have individuals from 3 leading schools who will talk about innovation in Catholic education. Short bios of them are in your program, so I hope you got a chance to look at them. And like building blocks, we have speakers from kindergarten to the 8th grade, to high school and on to college. Our guests will discuss new and exceptional examples of innovative practices taking place in their Catholic schools. And towards the end of today's session, like I said, we'll invite questions from the audience. So please join me in welcoming Father Michael Forge, pastor of Mary Immaculate Catholic Church. Father Forge has been a priest for 22 years, and of those 22 years, 11 of them have been at Mary Immaculate. Chris Reebok from Bishop Lynch High School. Chris has been at Bishop Lynch for 13 years, and he has done some wonderful things in the last few years, and we're anxious to hear about what he's going to implement in the future. And Dr. Thomas Hibbs is the incoming president of University of Dallas, and thank you so much for being with us, because he's not even official in his official job yet, so he came to be with us this morning. And you're the first alumnus to be named president of the University of Dallas. That's pretty special. He is currently the Dean of Honors College at Baylor University. So, Father Forge, I'm going to start with you. Okay? Mary Immaculate has existed for nearly 60 years, and it's a Blue Ribbon Award winner school. And you have been there for 11 years. That's terrific.
Thank you.
Your students receive instruction on reading, writing, and arithmetic, and everything in between, but there's a heightened emphasis on faith formation at your school. Because of your vision and perseverance, you have some of the Dominican Sisters of St. Cecilia, also known as the Nashville Dominicans, at your school for the upcoming school year. Please tell us about your thinking and how you got to that point.
Okay, well, thank you very much. What an honor to be here this morning. I want to start by saying, first of all, that God really likes me a lot. I don't know why, but he does. And he has blessed us at Mary Immaculate with the arrival of the Nashville Dominicans. We have Sister Marianne Zuber-Buehler, who grew up on a goat and sheep ranch in far west Texas. And she's a doctorate in education. She used to be the educator of the educators. So she's our new principal. And when she found out the assignment, she just hit the ground running. She came to Dallas. She was in Washington, came to Dallas right away, and has just really rolled up her habit sleeves and got to work. And so that all came about. Do you want me to tell the story how that came about?
Yes,
so
please.
When I first got to Mary Immaculate 11 years ago, I was in need of a new principal. And so I reached out to the Nashville Dominicans then. I had met them and was familiar with them from my work as a vocation director. So when I was vocation director back in '99, this order was just exploding, and they caught my attention because of their zeal for Jesus. I mean, their love of the Lord, their orthodoxy, and their charism of education. And so that's where I first met them. And so they were always there in my mind. And so when I thought about education at Mary Immaculate, I thought, would love to have them, working and serving at Mary Immaculate. Well, the Mother Superior at the time informed me, well, Father, we just don't have anyone to send. So that was 9 years ago. So I found a principal, and he was great, Matt Krause, who now teaches at John Paul II. And when he put in his resignation, I thought, well, maybe they have someone now. It's been 8 years. So I reached out to the mother again. It was the same Mother Superior. And she said, well, Father, we're changing leadership this summer, which was 2018, and I don't want to say no, but I don't want to say yes because it's going to depend on the new leadership. So if you can wait for the new leadership to make that decision. So I'm like thinking to myself, well, that's not a no, so I'll hold on to that. So I said, great. And so I hired an interim principal who was our assistant principal. Linda Coffin's done a fantastic job. And we waited and waited and waited. And then finally in the summer, they changed their leadership. I got a call from the new Mother Superior, and she informed me that they had decided that they would like to come to Mary Immaculate. And so I'm like, excellent. So obviously, I didn't make that invitation without getting Matt Varicki, the superintendent's okay, and it was certainly Bishop Burns was the powerhouse behind getting them to Mary Immaculate. I got to give him credit. I did the leg or grunt work, but he did the actual wooing, if you will. So anyway, so that's how they got here. They decided, they came, they looked at the campus. The very first, well, I brought them into, after we met with Bishop Burns that morning when they came in, took them to Mary Immaculate on a tour, and I love telling the story because the Mother Superior, she's tall, slender, and it was a team of 4 of them, and the kindergartners had just come back from lunch. And so we come in through the front door, and we're ready to give them the tour, and the kindergartners are all lined up, and one little girl looks at Mother Superior, Mother Anna Grace, and looks up at, "Are you an angel of God?" I'm like, yes. Couldn't have paid her. It was like that. That's how the tour started. So, and you know, when you walk through the halls of Mary Immaculate, there's a sense, and I'm sure it's like that at all Catholic schools, just a sense of unity, of familial, of bonding. Kids are engaged, and the teachers are engaged in the faith, and so it's a real good environment. And the sisters picked up on that right away. So that's how we got them, basically.
You hung in there
Yeah.
and perseverance. That's terrific because children don't see many nuns these days.
No, I'm sure that kindergarten had never seen a sister before.
Right.
Sure.
Well, I'm going to have some more questions for you, okay? I'm going to turn to Chris now. Chris, it's often said that a Bishop Lynch education is grounded in the belief in teaching students to strive for excellence, seek truth, and work for justice in the world. For the upcoming school year, you're introducing the house system. Can you tell us what the house system is and how it's going to work?
Absolutely. So
Thank you.
to echo Father's sentiments, I'm so honored and privileged to be here with you this morning. And excited to share with you about this development at Bishop Lynch. Over the course of the last few years, Bishop Lynch entered into a strategic planning cycle, and one of the key outcomes of our last plan was this identification that in order to continue to deepen our mission of forming the whole student, intellectually, spiritually, emotionally, physically, creatively, we needed to really take a look at how we organized our student body and how we engage with students outside of the classroom. And so we kind of identified 2 key pillars of things that happen in Catholic schools that make us really on the forefront of the place where faith and reason are integrated. And so what we decided is, there's a key thing that happens in the classroom during instruction. And that's driven by teaching, learning, curriculum, and the relationship between teachers and students. In addition to that, and especially in the life of a Catholic high school, the life of student formation outside of the classroom is of equal importance in forming young people to embrace their missionary call to become disciples of Christ. And so what we began was a reorganization on the student engagement side outside of the classroom, how we would organize the student body into groups to help us to go deeper in our commitment to pastoral care and helping young people to become the best version of themselves. So what the house system is, it's a subdivision of the school. So we've divided the school into 8 separate segments that are equal in nature and gender, and it's a cross-section of the school from freshmen through seniors, as well as a good mix of interests, so that each of the 8 houses, the segments are called houses, represents really a good microcosm of the school in its entirety. The house is further subdivided by 6 mentor groups. So no one house is larger than 150 students, and no mentor group is larger than 20 to 25 students. And what that will allow us to do is really have a deeper intention of developing the relationship between the mentor teacher and the students in that small mentor group, so that effectively during your 4 years of high school, you would be able to walk side by side with this caring professional adult in a non-threatening way, and so that you're not being graded by that person. You don't have to meet some performance standard. Rather, along the lines of what Pope Francis continues to talk about, this accompaniment, journeying with people, and that the witness to our faith is one of the greatest calls that we as adults have for young people, is to walk with them, to journey side by side, and to really be an evidence of what the faith has done for us in our lives. And so what this will allow us to do is 2 to 3 times a week, these mentor groups will be able to meet, so that over the course of 4 years, you'll really be able to see and develop a relationship from a mentor level. In addition to that, it really takes away what is the stereotypical idea of student government with student council, because much of that has become obsolete. And so it really will allow us a deeper level of leadership development for young people, because there will be many more opportunities for students to embrace leadership within that mentor group and within the house, to really allow us an invitation to leadership, which we think is a strong invitation from the gospel, that invitation to leadership. And because the school has a Dominican charism, we were founded by Dominican priests and sisters. We do have one Dominican sister who remains on the teaching campus, but the reality is that's an important charism for the school. So each of the houses has been named for Dominican saints and blesseds. So it will allow us to really develop a unique identity for each house, and to continue to deepen the understanding of those witnesses of faith that came before us in the lives of the saints. And so we're very excited about that. We have researched this for over 2 years. We found some schools in the United States have been doing it for about 10 years. To our knowledge, there's about 50 Catholic high schools across the country who implement this form of the house system, and our greatest model school was Archbishop Moeller Catholic High School in Cincinnati, Ohio. So we've taken several visits there, and we've had some of their staff come to help us with our training and implementation of that. So we're very excited about what this can do to allow us to deepen our commitment to care for students.
Chris, that's fascinating. Look forward to hearing more about it. Dr. Hibbs, welcome back to North Texas.
Thank you.
We're delighted to have you, and you take over July the 1st, I believe, at the University of Dallas. From an innovation perspective, what can we expect from UD once you get the feel of things and get situated in your new position?
Thank you. I want to second some things that Lydia was saying at the beginning. The work you all do is absolutely crucial to the work that we try to do. And thank you for your long history of supporting Catholic education here in Dallas at every level. I know there's been a long history and a lot of overlap between the University of Dallas and the foundation here, and I'm grateful for that. I look forward to getting to know many of you much better and hosting you on campus. I'm also really grateful that you set up this panel this way. It's not often that leaders from Catholic grade schools, high schools, and colleges or universities talk to one another, let alone at the level that we're doing this morning. And so I want to praise you for setting this up. I mean, I think we'd, particularly in colleges, we'd do our job a lot better if we paid attention to what you all were doing. And I've already got some things that I've learned from both of you this morning. It's glad to know that all three of us have UD or UD alums. That's a wonderful thing. We also all three have Nashville Dominican connections, and I'm delighted that one of the Nashville Dominicans who will be returning to University of Dallas in the fall to teach, Sister Eleanor, is someone I directed her dissertation at Boston College but too long ago to mention, but she's still pretty young, not so much for me. So I'm really glad to be with you. I look forward to working with many of you and excited to be part of this conversation. As you said, I'm not there yet. I'm still learning a lot about what's going on. I know that we already have numerous innovative programs. Our business school has a cybersecurity program that lots of people are excited about. In the Braniff Graduate School, we have relatively new and somewhat revived programs, one of which you were involved in leadership and in classical education. From my perspective, one of the things that I'm trying to figure out currently, we'll be looking at carefully over the next year, and this really touches on some of the themes that you were talking about, Chris, with the House system, concerns student life. We did a lot of innovative things at Baylor University, and the University of Dallas has done some innovative things. We're hiring a new dean of student life. I want to look at the ways in which student life is a real opportunity for us. It gets much more attention, I think, at the grade school and then the high school level. Colleges tend to separate these things off. John Henry Newman, the great Catholic thinker about education, gave a sermon on the Feast of St. Monica at the opening of University College Dublin, which he was instrumental in founding. And he said in this beautiful sermon, he said, the goal of Catholic education is to reunite things that have been rent asunder by man. And what he means by that is to reunite parts of the soul, so head and heart, thinking and acting, passion for truth with the passion for justice, piety and ambition. Newman worried that, particularly in the modern world, young people who were thoughtful and worldly and ambitious, that the parts of their soul would gradually split up. And this, he worried, would lead to a loss of faith, a loss to an appreciation of discipleship, being at the center of young people's lives. Student life, I think, in college is where these things come together. We do a great job in the classroom of educating the mind. The question is, where does that intellectual formation get integrated into the formation of the heart, the formation of a life of service? And student life, I think, is the place where that happens. I could talk a lot more about this if there are questions, but we've seen a real interesting trend over the past 15 years nationally, where even secular state schools who had kind of left student life to just go its own way are realizing now that there are lots of issues that go on in student life that impact success of students, impact their academic success. So they've come to places like Baylor and other places to look at what we've been doing in student life, and UD has been implementing many of these things to try and look at the formation, the health of our students in mind and body, but also the way in which that intellectual formation gets integrated into a life of service and a life of a discernment of calling that involves finding a career, but involves finding that career in a certain key where they see themselves as disciples, both in their career and in their communities, their churches, and their families. So I'd be happy to say more about that. There are lots of really innovative things going on in student life at the college level, which are in a way a return to older things. It's a recovery of things that we used to know about the formation of young people and we lost sight of over the last 50 years in higher education. We're bringing those back. As Catholics, we have lots of resources at every level for these things. And I'm excited about learning more about what's going on at the University of Dallas in student life, and then how I might be able to enhance the things that we're doing well and improve some things that maybe need improving.
Thank you, Dr. Hibbs. Thanks to each of you all for giving us an overview of some of your innovative things that you've got on the drawing board. But let's talk about some more about the specific aspects of innovation in Catholic education. As I said before, Father Forge, it's not very common to see religious sisters walking down the hall. And I think most of these are in habits, too. Is that right?
Yes.
What motivated you to bring the sisters here to Dallas to Mary Immaculate?
Thank you. That's a deep question, a very good question, and has a multifaceted answers to it. But on the surface, I mean, I grew up. My aunt was a sister, was a religious sister and teacher at St. Mary's in Leavenworth. So I grew up with a vocation of sister, of religious sister. My uncle was a priest as well. So it's just kind of part of my fabric, you know, having religious sisters and priests in my life. when I went to, I only went to Catholic school for 2 years of my life. I'm an Air Force brat, I was sharing that. So we moved around quite a bit. But the 2 years I was able to go to a Catholic school was in at Divine Redeemer in Colorado Springs. It was run by the Divine Redeemer Sisters, or Sisters of the Divine Redeemer. Those 2 years, 5th and 6th grade, were, for me, the most secure, formative years of my life. Because in Air Force, I was telling Chris, I lived in 10 different places before I was 11 years old, right? Wow. And so that was a lot of moving around. But those 2 years at Divine Redeemer were the most secure and, for me, formative years. And connected to that memory are the religious sisters. They too were in habit. And I was sharing this with Sister Mary Ann. I remember their faces. I don't just remember their habit, I remember their faces. And they had an impact on me. And I mean, so much so, I would say that when my life was in turmoil in my early 20s, I think it was the memories of that security that brought me back into the church, brought me back to looking to the church for that sense of stability. So they're very much part of my own conversion even. I want that for my school kids. Why wouldn't I? I mean, I want them to have an experience of church that gives them a sense of security, formation, love, and the sister, I mean, their teachers do that now, but it's just a different dimension when you have religious sisters that have dedicated completely, totally their lives to serving the Lord. And so who wouldn't want that for their kids, right? So that's what I want. I want my students to have that same kind of an experience so that if they ever encounter turmoil in their life, they will remember the security that they had when they were in grade school, because that's so formative, as you know. That
You
answer
have
the question?
a very good heart,
Wow.
Father. You truly do. The children are very lucky.
Thank you.
Chris, the house system you discussed seems to be a major systemic change at Bishop Lynch. Did you perceive something was lacking at the school to go looking for this?
Well, I would say the first way I would answer that question is I think schools in general, education in general is in a new era. And if we continue to teach the way that we have, we're preparing for students for a future that no longer exists. So I think the idea of becoming an adaptive school to prepare learners who are also adaptive is a big part of the mission of Catholic education, of the tradition of the preparation of the intellectual, but the integrated approach to the whole student allows us an opportunity to challenge, I guess, really how knowledge has shifted. You know, I think that there was a time pretty recently where soft skills were abundant and knowledge was scarce, right? There was even, if you think about it, there was even great examples on TV of great moral and character lessons and social emotional learning that kind of streamed through the life of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood or Father Knows Best or Leave It to Beaver, you know, and that dynamic has shifted considerably. And even in the home, the idea that soft skills and character and moral development is not an assumption we can make anymore as educators. And there was a time where the teacher was an expert in their field, a sage on the stage, if you will, and we actually had to go to libraries to learn something, right? Now with the advent of technology, I mean, we basically have the sum of human knowledge at our fingertips. And so that dynamic it's really shifted so that now knowledge is no longer scarce, but maybe soft skills have become scarce. The idea of respect, empathy, listening, being able to see differences amongst culture and community. Those are things that I think are a part of our need to form students who are ready to embrace leadership in their own lives, but also to be transformative leaders for the communities that they're going to land in after they leave elementary school, high school, and college. And so I think it's not that we noticed something that needed to change in Bishop Lynch. We are amidst the change, right? This change in education is it's never going to be the same as it was before. And we can't just put technology away and say it's evil, because it's going to continue to be an integrated part of our lives. And it's going to continue to be able to allow us to do things with technical skills, so that human skills are going to continue to increase in value. So that the idea of us being intentional and systematic, I think, might have been one of the things. I think you said systemic, but we wanted to really have an intentional and a systematic way that we embrace that change, and also our commitment to human relationships, interconnectedness, interpersonal skills that we can't assume students are going to be impacted by in any other place. And so this was an opportunity for us. And don't get me wrong, these things have happened in Catholic schools for centuries. This idea that a mentor or some caring adult can reach beyond the challenges of the intellect and the curriculum and whatever challenges, to really draw that student out to become the best version of themselves. But it happened in isolation. It happened kind of because of personalities. Now this is a way that we can build a systematic, intentional approach, so that to really embrace this part of our culture, if we're all pulling in the same direction, we have the ability to make a much greater impact.
That is wonderful. Having grandchildren in Catholic school of my own, I see where this would just be for children very personal, to help them develop with not just the books, but having a mentor and in a smaller environment is very exciting. I think it would be wonderful. Dr. Hibbs, the University of Dallas seeks to form the whole person, not just the intellectual aspect. How do you go about innovatively forming the moral and spiritual dimension of young people?
Thank you. That Father Knows Best reference has got to predate you.
Yeah, you can find
This is
anything
true.
on,
Google
on
that.
Amazon. Yeah.
But I appreciate the rep. Thank you for that.
Sure, absolutely.
You know, Chris said a lot that's directly relevant to what we're doing at the college level as well. You know, if you haven't noticed, our culture's in kind of a bad way in the United States. We're divided in ways that it's hard to go back to when we've been, and the level of hostility. You know, one of the, I saw a poll not too long ago that close to 50% of Americans, when asked, do you hate members of the opposite party, said yes. That's up from about 15% 20 or 30 years ago. That's not a good sign for the culture. One of the other ways in which the culture is in a bad way, and it's something that I think increases our uncertainty and anxiety about it, is that we're pushing more toward extremes, and this is partly because cable news stations and foundations can raise a lot of money by appealing to 1% on either side, and those are the things we hear a lot of. But this affects this question of innovation. I think there's a push in progressive politics and in certain other areas to move things extremely rapidly away from where we've been. And I think in response to that, there's a kind of reaction that wants to pull back and say, no more change. Let's go back. And this, in a way, it should be a great spot for us to be as Catholics to engage the culture. Because the Catholic Church over many centuries has been the best institution at mediating between past, present, and future. The Second Vatican Council was the great example in recent memory of an attempt to update the church, but to do so by digging more deeply into our theological resources, our liturgical practices. And so I think we have in the Catholic Church the ability, we have a language of drawing upon deep resources and finding things in our traditions that we've lost and finding them in a way that helps us to adapt to the present and to the needs of the present. I got from the University of Dallas some years ago a wonderful immersion in Western civilization and the Catholic tradition that prepared me better than any of the other people I was sitting next to in classrooms in the philosophy department at the University of Notre Dame when I left Dallas to go get my PhD. I was enormously well prepared academically. The other thing I got that I didn't know that I got at the time is an ability to think about contemporary issues and matters through the lens of a tradition. I've always been interested in liberal arts and career and professional development, liberal arts and the culture. I spent a lot of time some years ago driving back and forth between Waco to Dallas to see early screenings of films to review movies. And what I was doing in movie reviews was attempting to bring to bear the insights that I'd gotten from my liberal education on the contemporary culture. And I think what Chris said at the outset of his comments about how we can't do things the way we always did them. That's right. We need deeply to draw upon the resources of our tradition, but then we need to think creatively about how to apply those in the present. So that innovation has got to be innovation that suits our distinctive missions and that helps advance those missions. It's not just innovation for innovation's sake, but what you were saying about the soft skills and the interpersonal, those used to be integral to the culture that our students got in their families, in their local communities, in their churches. They still get it somewhat, but it's attenuated. And so our schools need to be much more attentive to those matters that we used to take for granted. And as Catholics, we have the resources to do that. But it's interesting, it's the best innovations, it seems to me, in education are always innovations that are drawing upon things in the tradition that have been neglected and then finding a fresh language and fresh ways of applying them in the present. And I mentioned that earlier with student life. That's one of the ways in which even secular universities are going back to traditional models of student life, but in a new language. And so I think that's, especially at the university level, we need to be the leaders on developing the resources of our tradition and applying them in fresh ways with fresh and exciting language for young people today.
Mm-hmm. It's going to be exciting. Exciting to watch you. And you're right on target at that. I'm going to throw some questions out to the group. So I'm going to let anybody answer. And so none of the things we have talked about today are necessarily focused on technology innovation. You've all talked about efforts that suggest there is a need to be more innovative in the areas of human formation and development and in organizational culture. So, as leaders of important Catholic schools in the Diocese of Dallas, what do you believe is your top responsibility?
I'll jump in on that one real quickly
Okay.
because, and I really like this idea of these houses, as you call them, because this current generation, the iGen as they're called, or Gen Z, whatever you want to call them, they're the generation that grew up with the iPhone. And so they spend more time in their rooms disassociated in real human contact. They're contacting all their friends and all that through their texting and all that. But they're graduating high school not ill-prepared for college life. Don't know how to handle a bank account. I mean, there's really, so I think technology, we need more things like this that Chris is talking about in terms of helping this generation learn how to relate at a human one-on-one kind of level in a group setting, develop social skills. Their technology skills are fine. They've got that down. It's their social skills that really needs attention.
Right,
So.
right. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, I think if you think about this generation is the most connected in human history, and we're seeing signs of maybe most disassociated, right?
Yep.
So that's a real conflict, the juxtaposition of those two ideas. But I think, Dr. Hibbs' point of saying the foundation of the church, of what we have, I mean, the house system is not a new and innovative idea. When you think about the early church, in the lives of the apostles, and going out to these small communities and purveying culture and the gospel message, the teachings of the church in a familial way, right? So this isn't a new innovation, but it's an opportunity for us to look back, like Dr. Hibbs said. It's like the wineskin and the wine and old skin kind of parable.
Yeah.
It's this idea. It's like our tradition is so rich and so deep that we just have, as educators, an opportunity to begin speaking that in a new way to really enliven the lives of these people being called to discipleship. And in some ways, it's new and exciting because we've lost so much of it, that this idea of like these units of small interpersonal connectedness provide a great opportunity for people to be in a place to hear and answer God's call for them, right? So I think the question was, what's the most important thing that we have to do as educators? And I think our role in leadership, not only to get students prepared for university life, to take a line from Matt Vericki, our superintendent, this path to college in heaven, but the house system gives us an opportunity to say, with our time with them, which is short, we only have 720 days in high school experience to impact them in a very formative time in their lives, to prepare them to go out of their homes for the first time, to live without their parents in that network and support and safety, to be able to embrace this idea of listening, of compassion, of empathy, and to be able to say, what is it that God is calling me to do, and then to have the courage and the knowledge to go get that.
Yeah, just briefly to continue on this, the most connected generation, but also the reports of the highest levels of loneliness. We've seen a huge spike in the last 10 years in students coming to college with anxiety issues. And the interesting thing is that it's often the most successful students who have the highest level of anxiety coming into college. And how do you deal with that? How do you build? The question I put to the students, you get, if you're doing a recruitment event with really high caliber high school students, every question they asked is some version of, how do I be really successful, right? And I tell them they're asking the wrong question, that the question is, how do you become resilient? And this for me is a really fascinating topic with this generation. How do you meet them where they are and then teach them to recover from failure? And when I say that, I can see some of the really calculative students thinking, okay, I'm going to go plan to fail and recover from that. I know that's not how it works. So how do you, the question for me is, how do you develop resilience? How do you teach them that you don't want to say it's just okay to fail, as if we're trying to inculcate failure in them, but it is in a sense okay to fail and to bounce back. How do you form them as resilient young people who can go out into the world and bounce back from failure, from challenge, from tragedy? That's a task that's even more important for us as educators.
Thank you. A year from now, what do you hope the headline will be written about your school?
We can think of a lot of headlines you don't want.
Yeah.
Seeking to hear their measurement of success
I was going to say,
at these new innovations.
the headline I'd like to see is Father Forge gets another 6-year term at Mary Magdalene. Because my second term ends next year. But, oh boy, only that, that Mary Immaculate School continues to thrive under the leadership of the Nashville Dominican Sisters. That would be a great headline.
That's good. That would
So I think mine would be twofold. A record number of Mary Immaculate students gain
you go.
entrance to Bishop Lynch, and a record number of Bishop Lynch students earn scholarship to University of
There we
Dallas.
Hey, all right. Yeah.
I think in addition to that, one of the things as, Dr. Chad Riley's here, our principal as well, as we have a lot of opportunity to do some reflective leadership practices as we're thinking about, this is a systemic change for the school. We are completely reprogramming how we want to interact with students while they're on our campus. And this idea of being seen and known and loved, I think continues to be at the forefront of why we're doing this, right? Because we don't want any students to slip through the cracks. Not only at the higher ed level, there are record numbers of anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation issues that young people are facing, even at the junior high level. And it's alarming, and we need to create a network where we are intentional and together we're pulling the culture toward this idea where every student should be seen, known, and loved. So I don't know if that's a catchy headline or not, but that's kind of where my thoughts are.
So, speaking to a foundation here, I'd like to see us in a position where we've got a great operating team raising lots of money for the University of Dallas, and we've got a trajectory to raise a lot of money. It's expensive, and we've got a lot of needs that good things that are going on that could be done a lot more effectively and successfully if we were raising a lot of money. So I'll be very frank about that. But in order to do that, and universities are, I should probably be put into therapy for even wanting to be a college president. Universities are places where American universities are enormously successful in lots of ways. Also lots of pressure points and lots of ways in which parts of the university can not just get separated but divided against one another. I'm coming from Baylor. You all have been reading since about the time I arrived there about internal divisions at Baylor and problems we've had to face. We had a great team in the Honors College where we just kept building and working. But over time, what you hope for, and what I hope for there, and what I hope for at the University of Dallas, is that all of our constituencies come enthusiastically together and are all working toward the same ends. I regard my role as a president, perhaps the first role as president, is as storyteller. I've got a lot to learn about the great stories. Two of them are right here from the University of Dallas. And so I hope a year from now, people are saying, man, that community's really working together. And I hope you all say, I love going out to Irving, to the campus, and visiting out there. It's a wonderfully hospitable place. I love engaging with the students, the staff, and the faculty. That's the local headline. That's not going to make it onto the front page. That'll get buried somewhere because it's too good news to make it to the front page. But that's the local headline that I'd really like to see for the university.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up to some questions. Anybody has any questions they would like to pose to anyone up here?
I have a real quick question
Uh-huh.
about the program you're putting in place, the house program. I would be excited to be a freshman. I'd be really sad to be a senior. How do you try and get 4 years worth of what you're trying to accomplish through the 4 years with your seniors as your
Well,
transition about? How do you do that, or can you do that?
yeah, I think as we've been talking to the schools who implemented this 10 years ago, there's no easy way. You can't go toe into the shallow end. You have to kind of plunge in. So the implementation cycle of this is actually a 4-year cycle, right? So we're really intentional about saying, hey, there are certain things we need to do year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, because we do need to get to a point where nobody in the building remembers how it used to be, right? And it does chip away at the traditional hierarchy of high schools, right? So freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors, those were kind of sacrosanct pillars that people existed in. But unfortunately, that's not an effective way to get people prepared to be able to embrace differences in college or in the work life, right? So we have targeted some specific rising seniors to really hone in on inviting them to, hey, you're the inaugural group. So there is a little bit of make or break in the development and the mentoring of that special group in this first year, right? Because they're the ones that are losing the most of how it used to be. And so we've been very, very specific about how we're calling them to this engagement, including them in the planning along the way, having student groups as a part of the focus groups and the planning study, so that we could have the student voice as a part of that, so that we weren't going to be deaf to the idea of how will this really affect students. So, but it's a really good question, and it's one that we continue to wrestle with of, how are we going to get people to feel like, okay, this is a part of my experience in high school. And then even further looking, from my perspective as the president, I mean, alumni engagement and philanthropic support, this is a dynamic shift of how the experience of Bishop Lynch High School is going to be marked by students' time there. So there will be a new generation of alumni who had it different than the others. And so we're starting to try to think about how do we extrapolate this out even further how could it impact us negatively or positively with the longevity of the relationship that we want to have with kids? Because it's not just 4 years, it's 40 plus years. We want them to constantly be engaged in the school. But it's a really good question.
Thank you, Chris. Anyone else? Chuck?
I've got about 1,000 questions for all three of you, but I'll keep it one. Father Michael, you've got 2 Dominicans. Can you get any more?
Well, that's the idea. Actually, Dr. Hibbs has 2 also. So there are 2 teaching at the University of Dallas, and then we'll have a principal and a teacher coming in next year. We are in the process, I've been working with JJ, the provost at UD. He and I and the advancement office of the diocese have been working together on getting a convent built, right? And the initial, I had an architect do an initial rendering based on the mother house. It was going to be like a little mini-me mother house convent, which would have 10 cells, and that's not a derogatory statement, that's what they call them. And Mother, I sent the schematics to Mother Anna Grace, and she looked at them and wanted to scale it back in some areas and expand it in others to 12 cells. So that's a good sign, right? So the idea is that as we have attrition with teachers retiring, that Mother or Sister Mary Ann would be in a position to bring in another sister to teach. And so, and that we would have we could house at least 12 sisters at this convent, which we hope to build in the next couple of years. So,
That would be wonderful.
There are a lot of people in this room who are members of the Sarah clubs, and there's an intersection between what you have managed to do and what we would like to see done. I mean, like you said, I've got 7 grandkids in Catholic school, and the only one that has a sister is at Bishop Lynch.
right.
And how are you going to get young ladies and women to look at a vocation in the church if they've never been exposed to anybody who's even had a vocation?
Most definitely.
You've got these 2 there, it's just for me, a heartwarming story. I hope
Well, like I said, God likes me a lot, but it's a huge blessing. And partnering with the University of Dallas on this convent project that puts the sisters on campus at UD, you know, and so you'll have the optics on that is just incredible, as you know. You'll have the sisters on campus. They can come out to Mary Immaculate. The idea is maybe even to other schools, if that's what they will like. This is actually part of Bishop Burns' vision to bring back religious sisters, communities, men and women, and bring them back into the Diocese of Dallas and make them part of the fabric of our diocese, and because it just enhances and enriches it. So, as a vocation person, because you and I go back to my vocation days, it is a blessing. It is a blessing. So, thank you.
Anyone else? We probably have time for one more question.
There's one way back
Okay.
there.
I can't see. Okay.
So we, actually there's 2 levels of leadership in the house. So the first thing we did is we identified a faculty dean to be the leader of each house. And their primary task would be to embrace the formation of the 6 mentors that would be really charged with the mentorship in their house. So the dean selection first came kind of through a leadership process of identifying characteristics and values of current faculty members and extending a specific invitation to them to say, we think that you have the potential to develop leadership within our building. And essentially, within that process, we selected 10 for 8 spots. So that 2 of the 10 kind of serve as the directors or the coordinators of the entire program. And so that was, we really had to identify talent in our building. And so, again, Dr. Riley and I, our principal, I think one of our tasks as the president and principal of a Catholic high school is also to prepare our professional staff to embrace leadership wherever it comes. Right? We want our professionals to constantly be seeking, what else could I be doing potentially to make a greater impact even when we're challenged sometimes because they get picked away to go be leaders in other schools. But essentially, that's our vocation as a Catholic school from an employment standpoint. And in identifying the mentors, they actually had kind of a draft, if you will. The deans sat together, and anyone who wanted to be a mentor could apply to do so. We created a profile for here's the expectations of what a mentor needs to be willing and able to do. And we had an overwhelming response from the faculty. We needed to find 48 because there's 8 groups of 6, and we had more than we needed. And so the deans had a really fun draft day where they said, okay, who's going to be the mentor in my group? They used the charism of each of their saints, you know, Catherine of Siena, Louis de Montfort. They really had an exciting time with it. So, and then the second part of your question was, yeah, so the other thing is we are on the verge of, this is a tipping point for a lot of other constituent engagement points for the school. So we're focusing on the student level first, but over the course of this 4-year implementation, we can see an evolution of our parent association being aligned with the houses, because service learning is a big part of Catholic education. So as we align service project and service work in the school, I think a lot of that will be house aligned, and we want parents to also be included in that. So we can foresee a future. We haven't written it yet, it's not prescribed, but seeing parent groups aligned with the houses, because one thing we'll do is keep siblings together in the same house. They won't be in the same mentor group, so that there's a lineage amongst families saying, oh, I was part of the Catherine of Siena house, or I was part of the Aquinas house, so that there's going to be some continuity to that.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to thank each one of you all for being here this morning and for educating all of us on what your